Well, let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome to ULT San Diego, here for the Aquarian series. This evening, the title of the presentation is Dhyana, a reading before we begin. From the voice of the silence. Be of good cheer, disciple. Bear in mind the golden rule. Once thou hast passed the gate Shrotapati, he who the stream hath entered, once thy foot hath pressed the bed of the nirvanic stream in this or any future life, thou hast but 7 other births before thee, O thou of adamantine will. Look on. What seest thou before thine eye, O aspirant to godlike wisdom? Yea, Lord, I see the path, its foot in mire, its summit lost in glorious light nirvanic. And now I see the ever narrowing portals on the hard and thorny way to Dhyana. Thou seest well, Lanu. These portals lead the aspirant across the waters onto the other shore. Each portal hath a golden key that openeth its gate, and these keys are Dana, the key of charity and love, immortal; Shila, the key of harmony in word and act, the key that counterbalances the cause and the effect and leaves no further room for karmic action; Shanti, patience sweet that naught can ruffle; Viraga, indifference to pleasure and illusion conquered, truth alone perceived; Virya, the dauntless energy that fights its way to the supernal truth out of the mire of lies terrestrial; Dhyana, whose golden gate once opened, leads the Narjal toward the realm of Sat eternal and its ceaseless contemplation; Prajna, the key to which makes of a man a god, creating him a bodhisattva, son of the Dhyanis. Such to the portals are the golden keys. We give you now our very own Laura Gray.
Thank you, Monica. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today and considering Dhyana. It's interesting to note there when it talked in the voice of the silence about the other shore. In thinking about the other shore in our linear way of thinking in our intellect, it seems like it's off in the distance. It is somewhere else. But when we look at the opening sign on the presentation today, it talked about consciousness, is saying that we must be free to contemplate. And so this shore is right here within us all the time. It's not anywhere else. It's there within our own heart and our own mind. And so we take into consideration what prevents us from contemplating, what gets in the way. And so we will look at that tonight as well. It's helpful to consider in our argumentative stage, as students, what we're doing is we're gathering the wisdom for this path. We are contemplating it together, it's like a jigsaw puzzle with the pieces all scattered. And between us all, we begin the process of pulling those pieces together. And when we practice Dhyana, we must apply it to our sevenfold nature, to the 7 times 7, the 49 fires. We must take into consideration the whole of the secret doctrine, not any one portion of it, but we must have assimilated the whole of it and take that with us into the practice of Dhyana. It is said that the masters of wisdom do not let one thought escape their mind without examining it in regards to the whole. And for them, the past and the present and the future are all one. There's no separateness between those states. We are to leave out no department of nature, visible or invisible. And so when we go into these virtues, we must take hold of the whole of this, the page 200 of the secret doctrine, that diagram. That has to come with us into our practice. So we see that the work that we have to do to get ready. At first glance, it appears that Theosophy doesn't say anything about this virtue of Dhyana, but it is not so. For everything that HPB writes is for this practice. When we think of meditation and contemplation, and we see in the West, everybody rushes to experience it, but we're like children who want the keys to the car before we've read the driver's manual. And we really need to stop and consider all of these important aspects that these masters have given us. Maybe this is one of the reasons why, they've given us the manual. We have to assimilate it. The other reason I think that very little is said about meditation or dhyana is because while the goal is one, the paths are many. And we all have 49 fires, 7 times 7. The 7 principles, and each principle is sevenfold. And we're all in different places. Some of us have, fires over here burning, and some have other fires burning. And so no one can give us the way through meditation. They can only give us the manuals, the laws of the universe, who we are, first of all, knowing who we are, and giving us the keys and the laws of the universe, and telling us where we've been and where we're going. And once we have that information, then we have to assimilate it, and we have to make it our own. And it is said by Krishna that we have to go on alone. We have to travel through these dhyani path, the paramitas, on our own. We have everything the teachers have given us, everything we need to do that work. So we are to realize, first of all, and this is really important to our understanding of the paramitas, that we are the perceiver of all the states of consciousness, that all states of consciousness are temporary, but the adept has awareness through all those states of consciousness. They have a purpose, and they are in complete control while we are not. They give us the benefit of their experience through the words written and by the light of their example. The secret doctrine gives us the journey that we have taken as thinkers and perceivers, and our connection with nature and the non-separateness from the one causeless cause into the countless differentiations that we see around us. And having given us all that, we're at the point in our evolution of mind, heart, and body, that our evolution now is by our own effort. And we have to take on this task ourselves, each one of us. The glossary indicates that the virtue of dhyana is a state of abstraction, which carries the ascetic practicing it far above the plane of sensuous perception. So we can see there from the beginning flyer that was sent out that consciousness must be free to contemplate. And we see that sensuous perception gets in the way of that contemplation. And so we have to move out of the world of matter. In the glossary, it says contemplation, and that it mentions in there that there are 6 stages of Dhyana, and they differ only in the degree of abstraction of the personal ego from sensuous life. And we should consider maybe the personal ego as the thinker, the perceiver, the chooser. And so we have to turn from sensuous life to the inner life to begin this practice of dhyana. From the Secret Doctrine, the Voice of the Silence that we just read from, the Bhagavad Gita, and Patanjali's yoga aphorisms, all is a preparation for this abstract contemplation that goes beyond our personal goals. Dhyana is to be considered from within the 49 fires, and it has 6 stages. And the books that we've been given along the way of our spiritual journey are signposts for that practice. The declaration of ULT indicates, as does Mr. Judge, that we are to see this work by way of service within our greater human family. We are to sustain this service. There must be an aligning of the 49 fires to the degree that we are capable of to be in harmony with the purpose of manifestation. A belief in universal brotherhood is needed to understand theosophy, to realize that we are brothers and sisters to all of humanity and to nature, is to reach an abstraction beyond senses and form, to see the unity in the diversity. And to quote the musician John Baptiste, we are born the same. Return to that place. When one of our humanities has these wonderful words that they share with us, all of these words come from a state of abstraction. They don't come from nowhere. They come from contemplation. They come from a practice of dhyana. And we can see the different degrees in our humanity of dhyana. Angela Merkel, the German chancellor for many, many years, must have experienced something of this abstract meditation when she wrote, "To see and understand, we must be able to soar above differences, to see this effort at work in our humanity. Truth belongs to us all and is not the property of any one country or culture, but operates in all. The spiral evolution," she said, "of the mind and hearts becoming more universal must be discerned globally." So all of us have wonderful words that we've gleaned from our humanity that show this abstraction to a certain degree. And it's important that as students of theosophy that we value, support, honor, and strengthen that effort amongst not just ourselves, but amongst each other and all of humanity. Of course, we must not get ahead of ourselves. Because it says right in the voice that we can all fall back, right up until the very final initiation. We can get stuck in a false idea, and likely are at this moment stuck to a certain degree somewhere. But we're part of the whole, and we can and should put in effort to sustain the whole. We all have a responsibility to do that, not just the Dhyani Buddhas who help us, but we too, as students of humanity, have that obligation as well. The great teachers and even our human teachers do this for us. And Emerson said that a poet is someone who holds an idea for us until we can make it our own. So we have an obligation as students to make these words our own words by putting them into practice and adding strength to them, by shedding them onto all three planes of human life at every step of the way. Do we stop? We did today to consider the great teachers who sustain these ideals through the force of Dhyana, and these ideas for our humanity. It is the life work or meditation of these great beings that make possible for us to evolve, live, and grow, and have our being. To do this, we must consider what gets in the way. And it's usually our likes and dislikes, our wants and don't wants, which are constantly changing and shifting and drawing the mind away from any contemplation. And so this is one of the first steps, as we see in the Paramitas, that we have to reduce our desires to a single point. And this leads us to that state of abstraction of the real, in which all becomes visible to us for a degree, as we saw with Angela Merkel in her contemplation as she's trying to solve the world issues. You know, she had to think in terms of the whole, not just her country, but the whole of humanity. While the full blossom of Dhyana is far ahead on the path, we have an obligation and a duty to nurture these virtues within ourselves and within others. As we think in more abstract terms and less in the sensuous and personal, the stronger will become the virtue of Dhyana. We are to live, as it says, to benefit mankind. That's the first step. To practice the virtues, the second. All are considered theosophists, as we see in the declaration, who engage in this service, whether they're students of theosophy or not. In so doing, they are not only lifting a little of the suffering around us, they are also working in harmony with nature. And as the voice of the silence indicates, that nature rejoices at that effort of living Dhyana. At the beginning of the voice of the silence, it speaks of the lower idi as the personality, but it is more than that, as it is made up of many lesser intelligences gaining experience through the form of the personality. The Pali word iti, it says in the footnote in the voice of the silence, is a Sanskrit word for siddhis or psychic faculties, the abnormal powers in man. They are of two kinds. One group which embraces the lower, coarser, psychic and mental energies, and the other one which exacts the highest training of spiritual powers. Says Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he who is engaged in the performance of yoga, who has subdued his senses, and who has concentrated his mind in me, Krishna, such yogis, all the siddhis, stand ready to serve. So we can see that if the siddhis make up the personality, then the personality is a very important part to play in our evolution. Desire nothing. How do we help these siddhis? How do we change them? How do we impress them? It says to desire nothing, to chafe not at karma, to accept everything that comes to you as your own, and take ownership, learn from it, and re-impress that energy with the highest energy that we can. We are not to struggle with nature's changeless laws. but struggle only with the temporary, the transitory, the evanescent, and the perishable. Help nature and work on with her, and she will regard us as one of her creators and make abeyance. We can see each other in all nature through the eyes of sense. As we said, our likes and dislikes and prejudices and false ideas. Or we can use the virtue of Dhyana and see abstractly the unity within this great diversity. Then the next step is an unremitting contemplation or devotion to that unity within the diversity on all planes and in all aspects of our sevenfold nature. To live the paramitas through the 49 fires, to reach the plane of causes, acting from the highest thought we can. We are acting for those elementals, those cities, today so that they will act for us tomorrow. In the publication newly printed this year from the ULT India, The Doctrine of the Bhagavad Gita by Shankar, on page 9, states 9 stages of devotion, which begins when we have acquired our control of our senses and our mind, as we have today here to focus on these ideas. And when we are fired by the desire of knowing truth. And so here we are. Those are the two requirements. Then the first stage is Shravana, an eagerness to listen. And here we are again, listening to each other today. It was so lovely at the other meeting as well. An eagerness to listen. Not just listening, an eagerness to listen. And the second step in devotion is Kirtana, the joyous participation with kindred souls. And that's what Shankar said. And so here we are. You think that this might have some application to those first stages of Dhyana, because remember there's 6 stages. So we could consider that as well. And it's interesting, the relation of prajna with the 9 I think it's 8 stages. I might have wrote that down wrong. The final stage is called Vandanam, which is like the virtue of Dhyana. It is to feel the presence of the self in all, everywhere and in everything. There's a wonderful mantra that is said, act for and as the self of all. That indicates that virtue of Dhyana. That self of all which is in everything and everywhere. When the divine life is felt everywhere, this, Shankar says, leads to the 7th virtue, prajna, the capacity for perception, universal mind, and mahat. The voice of the silence states, the paramita's heights are crossed by a still steeper path. Thou hast to fight thy way through portals 7 strongholds held by 7 crafty powers, our passions incarnate. Our contemplation and meditation should leave out no part of nature or ourselves, and must include these crafty powers, for these crafty powers are the energy that we will use in our work for helping humanity, but we have to subdue them. We have to bend them to the divine will. We have to make them more porous to the 7 paramitas. We raise the lower skandhas, impressing them with the higher potencies, Mr. Judge says, through the right performance of action. So when doing any duty, we are to put the quality of dhyana through the action and put, or as Mr. Judge says, put your whole heart into it. We must use the skandhas, the personality we are told in the voice, or it will use us. And Joseph Campbell in The Power of Myth mentions that we are to make sacred every act. The memory we kill out is not the elementals themselves, but the habits that we have imbued them with, that impede our effort to live the higher life or to contemplate. Our work that we do on this follows us through the incarnations. The more we understand the secret doctrine, the more we realize what it means by the state of abstraction and the formula that is to be applied to our sevenfold nature. To realize the power of the virtues not only in our service on the physical plane, we can turn to the elixir of life in 5 years of theosophy, to consider these virtues as a creative force and how it cannot be for 1 hour or so a day, but it must be unremitting over many years and lifetimes. And it reminds us to notice the pitfalls on the way within our own nature, not just on the external plane, but what are the pitfalls that we have within us? And the teachers indicate the currents or the eddies that we can get caught in for a little while or for lifetimes. So this simple word, dhyana, gives us little indication of the depth and complexities within it. And as those depths of meaning begin to show themselves within, we can feel like Arjuna when Krishna reveals his forms, as his form as all forms. Arjuna feels overwhelmed and begs Krishna, the higher self, to put down the veil and assume a more familiar form. And we can realize that, especially when we read the elixir of life, and we realize the power of our thought and its ability to impress nature and our sevenfold being. It can be a little overwhelming. So, what can we do with that? And what I find is very interesting in the voice of the silence, when we feel that our task ahead is very daunting, that it mentions the word cheer in 3 different places. And the first one is, take then as much as merit hath in store for thee, O thou of patient heart. Be of good cheer, and rest content with fate. Cheerful, happy, something about cheerfulness. He says, is what we owe others. Another spot in the voice of the silence, it says, be of good cheer, disciple. Bear in mind the golden rule. Once thou hast passed the gate, Shrotapati, he who the stream hath entered, once thy foot hath pressed the bed of the nirvanic stream in this or any future life, thou hast but 7 other births before thee, O thou of adamantine will. And the adamantine will indicates the lifetime's meditation that is ahead of us, an unremitting focus. But we are to be cheerful with that. And the third mention of the cheer is, be of good cheer, O daring pilgrim to the other shore. Heed not the whispering of Mara's host, Wave off those tempters, those ill-natured sprites, those jealous laymen in endless space. So here we are. The noise on this planet right now is quite high. The decibels are tremendous, and we feel it vibrating through our whole nature. But that's Maya. That is an indication a change is taking place within the inner nature of humanity. So even in this great disturbance, as we witness in the birth of a child, when they move from the comfort and the protection of the womb into the world, it's a change that is quite tremendous. And when we see this disturbances on the planet right now, we can look at it as this change taking place. So we have to be of good cheer, knowing that this is part of the unfoldment of the self, and not be too cast down by it. As we stand on the shore, and that was mentioned in our first reading, the shore, this vast ocean of Dhyana, this state of abstraction which carries us far above this plane of sensuous perception and into the ocean of contemplation. We must know our motive. We cannot be passive, or we'll meditate ourselves into a brick wall and have to trace back our steps and try again. Or worse still, we might carry a taint of selfishness and separateness, which, again, is not a bad thing, because that's how our awareness grows. One failure or one mistake at a time. All these forms are for the experience of the soul, which needs depth and breadth to draw it to the diamond. There is little value in achieving high states of awareness if there is no means to manifest it on the three planes of human life. We need a mind pure and clear, emotions calm and steady, and hands ready to work. We are to spiritualize the lower quaternary, that little boat on the shore of the sea of abstraction. We need an aim and a target to even begin. And we need a form with which to draw the bow. Having taken the bow, the great weapon, let him place on it the arrow, sharpened by devotion. Then, having drawn it with the thought, direct it to that which is, and hit the mark, O friend, the indestructible, the eternal. Om is the bow. The self is the arrow. Brahman is called its aim. It is to be hit by a man who is not thoughtless. And then, as the arrow becomes one with the target, he will become one with Brahman. Know him alone as the self, and leave off all other words. He is the bridge of the immortal. Meditate on the self as Om. Hail to you that you may cross beyond the sea of darkness. That is from the Mundaka Upanishads. And Mr. Judge says in his mantra, let us hit the mark, O friend. And that mark is the indestructible, the highest spiritual life we are at any time capable of. In the secret doctrine, we learn of the great teachers who, through the practice of Dhyana, from within this state of abstraction, sustain a current of beneficent force. We learn of the Dhyani Buddhas who sustain the cosmos to support all the lesser intelligences. Dhyana is the sixth virtue, as Buddhi is the sixth principle. They represent the heart as an active principle. While Buddhi is not fully awakened in us, we too, in a lesser degree, have that same obligation on this ladder of being. No matter what condition we find ourselves in through karma, we can always act in some way for the greater good of all. From Mr. Judge's letter on page 30 of Letters That Have Helped Me, he says, as regards the practices of concentration, they are only stages in a lifelong contemplation. They are means to an end, the highest path being that of constant devotion and entire resignation to the law. This has an effect on the physiological value within our lower nature, the skandhas that we talked about, the lower idi. The right performance of action arouses the faculties of the inner man, the magnetic vehicle of the soul, and the link between spirit and matter, he says, remembering always that spirit and matter are one. This practice trains the mind to remain in its own principle. We might consider what that means, to have the mind remain in its own principle, without energizing and without exercising its tangent force, which is hard to overcome, he says. Thought has a self-reproductive power, and when the mind is held steady to one idea, it becomes colored by it. And as we may say, all the correlates of that thought arise within the mind. Hence, the mystic obtains knowledge about any object of which he thinks of constantly in fixed contemplation. Our task is to control the energies within ourselves through self-examination and the work on overcoming the selfish habits of separateness. Our thoughts, words, and deeds need to be redirected through the application of the unifying forces of the paramitas. For being passively good in the absence of wrongdoing is not enough. The virtues are forms of strength from the soul. When the soul dominates the personal life, nature will respond. Nature strives to contain spirit, says Mr. Judge, and spirit strives to be free. Shall the substance paralyze the motion, or shall the motion control the substance? The interrelation of these two is manifestation. The ratio of activity governs spiritual development when the great force has gained its full momentum. It carries us to the borders of the unknown. It is a force, intelligent, self-conscious, and spiritual. Its lower forms or vehicles or correlates may be evoked by us, but itself comes, as the Bhagavad Gita says, only from its own volition. We can only prepare a vehicle for it, in which, as Bhiman says, the Holy Ghost may ride in its own chariot. And those are quotes from Mr. Judge. Looking at the extracts from unpublished letters from September 2021, it mentions abhyasa, which involves practice according to knowledge, and viragya, which means dispassion or indifference, as we know from the voice of to pleasure and pain. These are considered essential for the practice of dhyana, but the important point must not be overlooked. And this is, I find, very interesting because, it's kind of like a mental gymnastics here. So hang on for the ride here. Because Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that every time the mind wanders away from a certain task, from the subject under consideration, it should be brought back and put on the spirit. So when the mind wanders, we put it on a point that we want to contemplate, and the mind wanders. We don't bring it back to the point we wanted to contemplate, Krishna says. We bring it back to the spirit. So I often wonder, what does he mean by this? And from the unpublished letter, which I believe is Mr. Wadia, he says, people do not understand this. Well, he's right about that. If I'm engaged in, let us say, a mundane matter connected with my routine life, I'm supposed to be concentrated there. My mind wanders. I am called upon to bring it back, not to the work from which it wandered, but to the spirit. There is a spiritual basis or aspect, Mr. Wadia says, of every mundane activity. And the general direction is that you should find that spiritual aspect. For it is on the basis of the spiritual aspect that concentration or meditation or contemplation can be practiced. Could this be the first step of Dhyana, called pratyahara? Bringing the mind back to the spirit is to allow the light of our highest intention to shine through the actions being performed by the lower principles. We could consider that the attitude that we have could be the spiritual side of the mundane chore. Or, as Mr. Judge said simply, when doing your duty, put your whole heart into it. Mr. Wadia speaks of 4 aspects of meditation: the pratyahara, which we just mentioned, dharana, dhyana, and then samadhi. Without pratyahara and dharana, dhyana and samadhi are not possible. So it seems that the first step to dhyana is in our everyday life, how we live our life, to focus on our chore when we're doing the dishes or the laundry. See it as a sacred act. See it as a spiritual act, not a mundane act, and shine the light of spirit through that action. And if we do that, then it makes our hour that we have where we meditate much stronger, much purer, and of much greater benefit. The subject of dharana, which is the second aspect, is concentration, contemplation, and realization. And this must be achieved while we're doing our chores, while we're doing our duty, while we're at the grocery store, while we're at the library, while we're at work. That concentration, contemplation, and realization while we're at work must be there. That's important. And we must come to a central point, even while we're at work, focusing on the people around us, focusing on giving them the light of our higher self to the degree that we can. Every word indicates something, a coming together to a center. Now, when we look up the root of the word contemplation, it is a consideration of that which has come together to contemplation. Then samadhi is the possession of the object contemplated upon, becoming one with that object. As a matter of fact, every wandering mind, Mr. Wadia says, and this is interesting, every wandering mind, without meaning to, goes through all these 3 stages, which is interesting. At one stage, it is the lower self that is in a concentrated position when it's contemplating on the higher self and becomes one with that higher self. Then the next position is that having become one with the higher self, says Mr. Radia, once again he descends into his lower nature as a superior controller than when he left his ground previously. So let's consider that again. When we have our meditation and we take our lower self and we raise it up to the higher, and we have our higher contemplation, then when we come back down into the lower, we have an obligation to, and the ability to shine the light of the higher into the lower and around us. And that is, then that prepares us for the next stage of Dhyana, sorry. It's interesting, though, to note that Dhyana is only mentioned 3 times in the secret doctrine, but yet we should consider that the whole of the secret doctrine is an expression and a study of Dhyana. And that, I think, is a very important part of our study here. In page 572 in volume 1 of the Secret Doctrine, it states, gives us a hint of the highest degrees of Dhyana that our great elder teachers and the great Dhyanis and the Daihon Shohans and the great architects sustaining such a high power of Dhyana. And it mentions the Lord Prajapati. Sorry, I'll start again. The Lord Prajapati, Brahma, created all this by the mind only, by dhyana, or abstract meditation, and mystic powers like the dhyani, the divine, purely Adi-Buddhic monad, manifests as the universal Buddhi, the Maha-Buddhi or Mahat, the spiritual, omniscient, and omnipotent root of divine intelligence, the highest anima mundi or the Logos. This descends like a flame spreading from the eternal fire, immovable without increase or decrease, ever the same to the end, the cycle of existence, and becomes universal life on the mundane plane. Oh, there's so much. The glossary mentions Dhyana 8 times in association with so many words. It's amazing, really, to consider in its depth. One is Abhisvaras, starts with ABHA for anyone who wants to look it up. It says, the devas are gods of light and sound, the highest of the upper 3 celestial regions, or planes of the second dhyana. A class of gods, 64 in number, representing a certain cycle and an occult number. Abhijana, another word in the glossary, and it says 6 phenomenal or supernatural gifts which Sakyamuni Buddha acquired on the night on which he reached Buddhaship. This is the 4th degree of dhyana, the 7th in esoteric teachings, which has to be attained by every true arhat. And then another one starts with Kalavinka, a Sanskrit, also known as Kalyanda, Karanda, Karanda, Karanda. It is mentioned as the sweet-voiced bird of immortality. Though the bird itself is allegorical and non-existence, its voice is heard at a certain stage of dhyana in yoga practice. It is said to have awakened King Bimshara and thus saved him from the sting of a cobra. In its esoteric meaning, the sweet-voiced bird is our own higher ego. And we can consider the bird that's mentioned in the Voice of the Silence that sits in a cage and warbles not. So that, and then to finish our talk for today, there's two other meanings, and I won't read them from the glossary, Trikaya and Trailokia. Quite long definitions in the glossary on those. So to finish the talk today, we must attain to a proper state of mind or mental devotion in order to know how to skillfully perform our actions without doing so for the sake of result, but doing them because they ought to be done, because they are the duty. The duty is the royal talisman. And from Mr. Judge, he says, we should all strive to lift up the conditions of others. He reminds us, don't strain. Maybe part of the meditation is just looking at the condition we find ourselves in. Found that was very helpful. And Blavatsky wrote, we live in an atmosphere of gloom and despair, but this is because our eyes are downcast and riveted to the earth, with all its physical and grossly material manifestations. If instead of that, man proceeding on his life's journey, if he looked not downward but heavenward, which is but a figure of speech. We don't look at, sorry. I'm going to read that again from HPB. If instead of that, man proceeding on his life's journey looked not heavenward, which is but a figure of speech, but within himself, and centered his point of observation on the inner man, he would as soon escape from the coils of the great serpent of illusion. From the cradle to the grave, his life would then become supportable and worth living, even in the worst of phases. And from Mr. Judge, having once turned thy mind to the light of that true sun, thou hast cast thyself upon that great stream of divine energy which flows to and from that sun, and never more canst thou claim back for thyself that life. Live then, so that the duty may be well performed. And from Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge on page 74, the universal consciousness of the real ego transcends a millionfold the self-consciousness of the personal or false ego. Such a great and wonderful work we have before us. If we can begin to think less with the senses and begin to embrace the force within of dhyana, the state of abstraction. So thank you, everyone. So where is everybody? Hello.
Well, we're here. Believe you me, we are
Hello.
here.
Oh my goodness, what a great struggle.
Oh, that was so
Getting all those
beautiful,
words out.
Laura. Laura, that was just wonderful. Thank you for that just marvelous presentation and for giving us once again the message from the voice of the silence, taking us through so many of those important and points that cause us to meditate, that really give us just that nugget, just enough to that can give us something to think about throughout the day. And of
Yes.
course, those wonderful citations from Judge, from Wadia, from the Bhagavad Gita, and so on. Um, does anyone out there have any comments, questions? Oh, hi there, Judy. Welcome.
Hi, Judy.
I couldn't get my hand to raise mechanically, but a wonderful, profound talk, Laura. And it made me think that when I first started meditating, I think many of us think of a meditation of an expansion of the consciousness that we experience now. But it seems what the Bhagavad Gita is telling us that we're going to be entering a completely different state of being if we reach Dhyana. And do we need to reach Dharana first, which I understand is a complete
Yes.
spectrum from the senses?
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting. I've never considered the 6 stages of dhyana before.
Yeah.
And in all the different ways that power is being used in our daily life and in the cosmos and in the solar system. And it's all here right now. And even as it mentioned, everyone is using it, whether they're aware of it or not. Those 3 stages are being gone through with every thought that we have, which I found very interesting to consider. And the importance of weaving the dhyana through our daily life, through our duties, which really stood out for me, that we have this opportunity every moment to shine the light of the higher through the lower, to raise above, as HPB said in her quote, to stop looking down, and start looking within, not heavenward. Don't look up there, don't look down there, just look within. And it's interesting that no matter what condition we find ourselves in, we always have the ability to shine light. That never leaves us. It's always there. Monica?
Well, I just want to thank you, Laura. This was absolutely beautiful. I think that every method of doing a presentation has its own beautiful value.
Well,
Uh,
thank you, Monica.
yes, I mean, using slides is a gorgeous thing that permeates, but not using them in this particular instance it seemed to draw me in further, and the idea of using the various writings to explain this was so incredibly helpful. And I think, lastly, what I got from your presentation is that you created a bit of a seamless um, road, let's say, from higher to lower, engaging the Dharma with
Mhm.
of everyday life. And it's so easy to get involved in. I like this part of it. I don't like that part of it. This part of my life, I want to do this. But to remember it as an offering and a spiritual practice, it just changes everything. And then it's a matter of becoming habituated and functioning that way. So thank you so much for that gorgeous reminder of all that.
Yeah. Well, as theosophy indicates, that it's not a matter of going anywhere, of going through the portals like we go through the gates at the park. It's a matter of becoming. And so all this, our personalities, the lower id, all have to be imbued with the highest thought, as Mr. Judge says, that we are capable of. And we are to shine that becoming onto all three planes of human life, onto the astral, the physical, and the mental planes. We have to shine the light on all three planes. And the best way to do that is through the form that we occupy, through the body. We can't leave out any department of nature, and that includes all the elementals that make up the 49 fires that we carry around with us. So, did you still have your hand up, Judy?
Did it finally go up? Okay, no,
No. Okay, Ken, what do you have? I'm hoping somebody will come and share something that more of Dhyana, that would be good to hear. But go ahead, Ken, and then Shobha.
Yes. Actually, first, thank you so much. I just a little clarification for me as I'm kind of grasping these concepts of the 49 fires and the other aspect of Dhyana, which is that profound concentration idea of dharana. So first, I know we have a septenary nature. I'm comfortable with that, and it's 7 layers uh, of our consciousness. But I've been a little mystified about the 49 fires. I wonder if you could say a little more about that, Laura.
Well, again, we can only speak from our own experience. And how many of those fires are we aware of? And how many of them are burning? How many of them are latent? How many of them are we even aware of? And when we look at the sea of our humanity, and we see beings, no two blades of grass are the same, no two human beings are the same. So what is the cause of that great complexity? You have the great work of, say, Jane Goodall or Gandhi, and obviously they've got some fires burning that aren't burning here, that they're doing pretty good on some levels there, that they can do that work. And that all came by their own effort, as we said at the beginning, that our evolution now is by self-effort. So all these great beings doing wonderful things on this planet, even that Andre who has the world kitchen, there's a certain scandic harmony taking place on the abstract planes within him that brings him to the position where he can do that. And what's interesting is when you perform those kinds of actions, when you shine the light of the higher through the lower, you become very much aware of the lower. It starts talking to you, gets kind of cranky, points out its irritations. And there's where we can see some of the fires that we need to harmonize with the whole. But, as my husband used to say, you can't steer a car that isn't moving. So you have to perform duty, and then you become aware of what needs to be steered and how to adjust it. So, and again, are we aware of those 49 fires, 7 times 7? Each of the principles is sevenfold and contains within it the higher and the lower. And so, and we become aware of those fires when we perform duty, when we perform action, when we have our thoughts. And when we see the work of Gandhi, it took lifetimes for him to get to the point where he could do that task. It didn't just happen by magic, that he was magically prepared. There must have been lifetimes of work to prepare for that. So, Shobha?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. I'm having some problems here. I was just thinking, was it last week or the week before we had Jonathan giving us like a riffing, like a jazz riffing, and today I felt like it was an orchestra that kind of built energy in the end when you put all that talk about not only Bhavani Shankar's 9 steps of devotion, but you also went into the different levels of dhyana. I just wanted to share with you what Patanjali says in book 3.
Yes, thank you.
It starts out saying that fixing the mind on a place, object, or subject is attention, and this is called dharana, which you mentioned. Number 2, the continuous of this situation is contemplation, and that is given the name dhyana. And then continuing this contemplation, when it is practiced only in respect to a material subject or object of sense, is meditation, and this is called samadhi. But it doesn't stop there. Number 4 says, when this fixedness of attention, contemplation, and meditation, this threefold, are practiced with respect to one object, they together constitute what is called sanyama. William Conjudge very clearly says there is no English word to describe this sanyama. And we use the word restraint, he says, which doesn't completely explain it. And it seems to be like sanyama is just perfect concentration, is the closest we can get to. But I just think when I look at what the Patanjali says, and what we see in what you quoted from Bhavani Shankar, the 9 stages of devotion, or if we look at the Bhagavad Gita and talk about the sacrifices that we have to do, the different sacrifices, they're all talking about the same thing, the road to dhyana. Yes. And I just wanted your opinion and comment on that.
Well, I found Wadia's example there from the Gita as well, that when your mind wanders, don't bring it back to what it wandered from, bring it back to the spirit, which I thought was very interesting. And what that means, what does that mean to, and maybe other students too, and to add with what Shobha indicated there, to bring your mind back to the spirit. And the only way that I've understood it right now is what Joseph Campbell said in his Power of Myth, to make what you're doing sacred. To make, and something about every mundane act has its spiritual aspect. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well, that's where your 49 fires come in too.
Yeah, that's right. And so, applying that to Patanjali's, that, and that's the work that we have to do. So oftentimes people see meditation as a getting away from something into something else. But everything that we read tonight and my research on dhyana indicates that it's the reason you go into those higher states is so that you can manifest that energy into the lower iti, into the lower cities. It's the only reason to go up is to come, or go within is to come back down in to the physical. And that what's interesting too with the Dhyani Buddhists is that's what they're doing for us. They're doing that for us. They're sustaining the atmosphere, which allows us to do this work. Like Emerson said, they hold an idea for us until we can make it our own. That we have an obligation to make this our own. That they're doing the same thing. We're doing it to a lesser degree. But when you consider the whole, that we're all participating in that grand orchestra, as you mentioned. Lori?
Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure I totally understand about what it means to bring it back to spirit. I was trying to understand if that meant to bring it back to the thought of the higher self, if that's what we were discussing, or if that's what might be meant. And for me, if that was what that meant, then we have spoken, I think it might even be in the Gita where I don't know it well, but where it says, all action or all cause comes from there. So it's the root of everything that's actually happening.
Yes.
So if that's kind of where my thoughts went, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. It does say that in the Bhagavad Gita, that everything comes from me, Krishna. But it also says that something kind of perplexing that maybe in the opposite direction is that it says we do nothing in eating and sleeping and drinking and working and playing. Those are just nature moving in its natural direction. And, that brings to mind this idea of bringing it back to the spirit, because our job is to shine the light through those actions. As the mind beings, as the heart and the mind, we are supposed to, whatever task we're doing, the mundane world, the mundane task, it seems to be what attitude are we holding while we're doing these tasks? That seems to be our real plane of action. And then that brings to mind that what it said there about the mind staying in its lane, so to speak, staying in its place, not getting attached. What do we think, Desiree? I see.
I think I remember you saying it's principle. It needs to
staying in its own principle. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was an interesting one I think for all of us.
Yeah, that's right.
A little bit of
yeah.
thought. I'm wondering. Oh, Ken's got another question. Just a really quick one though, before Ken. You mentioned Shravana. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Shravana, eagerness of listening.
Yes, one of the first stages of devotion to
and
listen.
And Kirtana, joyous participation with kindred souls. I was really kind of focused on this eagerness of listening. It's something that we try to do in terms of, I think we term it active listening, which means kind of in a separation from our own ego so that we can experience the experience of another human being, which we already have that knowledge of, because none of us experience in silos. We experience everything together. We just don't realize the complexity of our experiences and how they interrelate. But when I thought of the eagerness of listening, how we need this in our world today.
Yes.
Just so many contrary and just negative voices that are not listening, that are simply deaf in a lot of cases. But the fact that there even has to be an eagerness, a joy with that listening, and an eagerness to learn, really can take humanity in another direction.
Yes.
Ken, I see your hands up. Is that?
Yes. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
So I was wondering if the 49 fires, and I think Lori was asking about it, Lori Kelly, could it be that, say to use the 7 principles, say the Linga Sharira, the sort of manifested physical form itself has the 7 layers within it. So there'd be like a Linga Sharira of the Linga Sharira, sort of a prana of the Linga Sharira, and then a buddhi of the Linga Sharira. And then Laura was saying that our meditation on something that's manifested in physical is purely the Linga Sharira of the Linga Sharira of that object, that cat or dog or that table or that flower that we're looking at. Then as our mind wanders, we'll go back to then, as best we can, to the Buddhic aspect of the cat or dog or flower that we're looking at. And yet it's still that thing that we're seeing, but we're looking at the spiritual aspect of it, the Atmak layer of it. Is that a way to understand these 49 fires?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And two, that the power of the mind and the heart on matter is never to be underestimated. We can lift it up or we can cast it down. And this is how. This is This is where our work is. And we know that we can purify water with good thoughts. We know that we can strengthen the plant kingdom with good thoughts, and we can hurt the plant kingdom with bad thoughts. That, you know, that those are all, and these are all part of the 49 fires and the use of those 49 fires and the unity and the great diversity, you know. So yes, it's happening. It's all around us, you know, and we're using these powers, whether we're aware of it or not. You know, the woman in the grocery store that helps somebody that's in trouble outside, she's using these powers of the 49 fires. She's using Dhyana. She's using abstract thought, whether she's aware of it as abstract thought or not. She's seeing the unity. So, and that's a state of abstraction to see that unity. So it's there all around us.
Fantastic. Yes, that does help me quite a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
I always think of the seven fires as, well, of course, that's all energy, but when I think of all of the primary, not primary, but all of the colors of the rainbow being actually one color or no color at all, but they diffuse in seven, and then each one of those seven, and we can call them seven sounds too,
Yes.
actually do the same thing in a kind of fragmented way, but in a very, you know, in a very orderly way, refragment into another seven, but they're actually one.
Yeah. Everything is one. The biggest number is one because it includes everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's
So
right.
the sizes, yeah.
Yeah. Maluka has a comment here, and see the chat. Devotion to Bhagavan begins when the man acquires the control of his senses and mind. By following the Pravriti Marga, according to the injunctions of the Shastras, and fired by the desire of knowing the truth, he studies deeply the scriptures. Where there is this soul, hunger comes to devotion. Yes, thank you for that complete quote. That's beautiful. These Dhyani Buddhas, she says further, emanate or create from themselves by the virtue of Dhyana. Yes, and this is from the glossary. The celestial selves, the superhuman bodhisattvas, these incarnating at the beginning of every human cycle, I have to move it down, on earth as mortal men, become occasionally, owing to their personal merit, bodhisattvas among the sons of humanity, after which they may reappear as Manushi human Buddhas. Oh yes, that's from the Secret Doctrine. Thank you. Thank you. That, you know, it's
Thank you too for your lovely talk.
Oh, you're welcome. There was some thought that came to mind, but it's gone for a moment. David.
Hi. Yeah, thanks
Hi,
for
David.
that wide-ranging presentation.
Well, Jonathan challenged me. He said I was supposed to go deep. He
You
said,
did,
well,
you
we'll get
did,
into
you did.
deep. So I went
Yeah.
deep. I almost drowned. I need a life jacket.
You're treading pretty good water. But I was thinking that in a sense, there's two maybe aspects we can look at Dhyana as. One is as the process of refining our nature through meditation, the seven principles. In other words, they become tools then that we can use in the meditation in action that we've been talking about. Performing action.
Yes.
So it seems like we need both aspects. We have Dhyana within us in a way, but it has to be evolved and refined, no?
Yep. It needs exercise, just as a runner in a marathon needs to exercise the muscles. We need to exercise it. So the woman who stops what she's doing to help another in need at a grocery store, she's exercising that
Right.
muscle of Dhyana. And
Right.
and it's our duty as a humanity to recognize those efforts, to strengthen those efforts, to recognize them when they're happening and encourage and nurture those kinds of things. That's all part of the virtue of Dhyana as well, you know,
But
because we
getting back
can't
to
leave out
yeah.
anybody.
I was going to say, but getting back to the two aspects, like the woman in the store who reaches out to help somebody, say to pick them up if they've fallen, in order to be able to do that, they have to have been doing strengthening exercises to have the strength to do it. Maybe
Yes.
that's the daily practice of, say, meditation within to refine one's faculties.
You know, we use the example of Gandhi. He didn't just poof magically appear in India to begin that work, to do the work that he
Right.
did. That took lifetimes of preparation to get to that point, to have that strength, the moral muscle, the ethics, and everything like that. All this takes time
Right.
and lifetimes and effort. And it's all part of our evolution, you know. And even as when getting back to what Desiree said too about listening, you know, when we go to an art gallery or we go to listen to a concert, our head is so full of different things. All of that has to get out of the way before we can see the work of art, before we can hear and listen to the concert or the talk. And, you know, we come into a meeting with our head full of mundane things that have been taking place all day long. You know, all of that has to be subdued in order to listen. And, you know, that's part of our effort as a humanity as well. You know, to listen, we have to subdue the senses, you know.
Oh,
David?
yeah, one other aspect early in your talk, you spoke about that, we have to, make our own choices and act from within outward on our own. We have to do it ourselves. Yet at the
Yeah,
same time, in what sense is it true that although we have to do it ourselves, at the same time, we're never alone?
that's right. Yeah, we're never alone because all these intelligences that make up our sevenfold nature, this aggregate of being that we carry around with us, that we're not alone. You know, that's there with us as well. And you know, something else that came to mind, but I lost it again.
They're also with the people that cause us strife.
Yes, that's right. That's right. But
I think
I liked what HPB said. Stop looking down at all the misery,
Right.
you know? Yeah. And what the Dalai Lama said, what we owe others is our happiness. You know? That's what we owe, to shine that light. I think
And
that's what he means.
this
I
idea we're
can,
doing it together. No, I mean, one of the symptoms in our time, especially people have, a lot of young people, not only, is a sense of isolation,
mhm.
of feeling alone. So
Yes.
to be able to cultivate that idea that that's not really true, can be helpful, I think, to others and to
Well,
ourselves.
HBB said something about, she calls us the orphan humanity.
Mhm.
And maybe we're alone because we've put the bird in the cage, the higher self. And as Mr. Judge said, if you're feeling yourself low or separate or alone, the best thing for you to do is go find somebody that needs your help and start helping them. You see, so we got to let the bird out of the cage.
Mhm.
That the reason, you know, we're the orphan because we've put our higher principles, as it's like Prospero in the Tempest, you know, the higher principles are put on an island, and Ferdinand has to go to the island to find them. He's the mind, you know. So that's what's going to get us out of the loneliness and the separateness that we feel.
Mhm.
Maluka?
Yes, I was thinking what you said, it really hit the note, because I came across people that were always like complaining about their pain and complaining about themselves. And then it came into a situation that a daughter got really sick, and she had to then sacrifice herself to make her better and to care for her. And she said it was a miracle. All her pain, all her pittiness went away because
Yes,
she was no longer thinking about herself. She was helping somebody. And I think that's the thing of brotherhood and sisterhood. When we help each other is when we find the freedom, when we connected to the higher powers, but
that's right.
not by being isolated and being selfish.
But we isolate ourselves, and that's what Buddha said that, he says, you hug and kiss these spokes of agony. Let go and be free. Know ye not that ye are gods, And everything that HPB writes is to lift up the burden of this suffering of loneliness, because we have to connect with those higher principles within ourselves, and then we can go out into the world. We got everything we need. We won't feel separate from anyone, but we have to start there with our higher self, you know, that's where it begins. Any other final thoughts?
Well, thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was
Oh
a
my
lot of fun. But like I say, I felt like I was drowning in the middle of the ocean with this Dhyana.
Yeah, just to the other point, I know my father used to always tell me, and he of course was a theosophist as well, but he used to say, if people would not think about their issues, but only serve to help others in theirs. And I don't remember if he said 50% or what. I think he said most of our mental illness would go by the wayside. That part of this obsession with self and selfishness is actually creating mental illness.
Yes.
We're just not aware of it. We're just not aware of where it's coming from. But
You bring up a good point there, Desiree, because meditation is causing a lot of problems for some people, in that that if they don't have a knowledge of the self, the isolation of the soul, as Patanjali said, then meditation is like taking your boat of the lower quaternary, your little tiny boat full of leaks, out onto the sea of abstraction. And it's going to sink it's not going to float very well. So, it's I think the meditation requires, first and foremost of all, a knowledge that you are not your body, you are not your mind, you are not your desires or your likes or dislikes. But you are the light that shines through them all. And if you can hold that position, then your meditation will be helpful. But for some people, it can lead to a pretty dark, depressing place. And that's becoming more apparent in our Western psychology, I think.
I would say that technology, with all its effort and braggadocio about connecting us, and I say that carefully, here we are all connected because of technology. But it's being reported that it's causing it can't really replace the human heart and its need for connection. And so that seems to be a very interesting thing. So I would think that we're very fortunate because we're using technology to connect with these ideas, which is a totally different ballgame than the young kids who are glued to their phone all day. So That's something
using it to destroy people's lives.
Precisely.
Yes.
So
well, that's always been the case with any new thing that humanity discovers. The
Yeah.
worst that, it's used for the worst things before it's used for the best things. That the selfish are usually the first ones out of the gate.
Yes,
A point there.
And the altruistic are way behind. And we're slow. If we're living the altruistic life, we're not as fast out of the gate in this materialistic world.
Yes. And just one last thing,
Okay.
the study, embracing these studies and adding to it the proper, as you noted, the proper type of meditation, which is the meditating on the self of all, so
Yes.
that wipes out separateness. And so gaining a practice in these ideas, and of course, all through the teachings, we know that this idea is there.
Yes.
It's a different take on aloneness if you have to be in that particular position, but
Yes.
oneself. So
Oneself. Thank you, Monica, very much. And thank you, everyone, for participating today.
Oh, and thank you, Laura.
Laura, you have some notes, and I was just going to mention something very quickly. The Native American believe that the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth.
Yes.
And when we die, they take us back, right? And look at all the wars for territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Territory that doesn't belong to anybody, really. And at the end, they're going to age before they're able to rebuild all that so-called territory for greed or power,
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maluka. Well, as Monica indicated, it's all one. Man and nature evolved together. We're not separate. So thank you. And Ken put in an advisory from the Surgeon General in the chat if anyone wants to click on it before we close the meeting, so that you can look at it later.
And Judy says, thank you, Laura, for all you have said, focus and enlighten. Lori says, thank you, lovely talk. And if everyone's had a chance to click on that link, we're going to be closing out here pretty soon. One final thank you to Laura for your beautiful, beautiful presentation. And a reminder that we'll be discussing Scorpio next Saturday. So we hope you can find the time to be with us then. And everyone, a wonderful night to all of you. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
bye-bye.